So today, we're going to talk about GPT-4. Whoa. It's pretty awesome. The only way to try it at the moment is either being a Plus subscriber on ChatGPT. That'll give you an option to choose GPT-4 as the model that you're interacting with. And the only other way is through the API that they've released for it. If you have access to it at this point, they're rolling it out right now. It's basically like, you know, the same thing as 3.5, except trained on a much larger data set, way more parameters, this, that, and the other thing. And it definitely shows. Because like I said, you can try it as your interacting model on ChatGPT if you have a Plus subscription there, which in my opinion is totally worth it, by the way. But its ability to do advanced reasoning, like much more complex, not just summarization, but instruction as well, basically just all sorts of different things. It's kind of just better at everything across the board compared to 3.5. I personally use ChatGPT primarily for basically as a programming assistant, right? So whether it's summarization of documentation or adding XML comments to my code, generating code for me, it's very helpful as an AI programming assistant, especially with this new GPT-4 model. I haven't really gotten too in-depth with my experimentation with GPT-4 quite yet. I've tried it a bit. And what I have tried so far, obviously, are software related, and its ability to understand constraints and like deliverables and all sorts of different things, even from just like copying, pasting documentation for an endpoint into it and asking it, hey, I would like to represent this with C# classes, right? And what I found so far is it's way better than 3.5 at more advanced multi-step things like that, where it needs to get an understanding of the endpoint through the documentation, devise a way of representing these different like response objects and whatnot as C# classes, and then it's also capable of giving you obviously methods to actually utilize these different objects to interact with the API. With 3.5, you were able to get it to do that, but you really had to hold its hand. And the short scope of memory that 3.5 has, comparatively, really hurt when you started like just giving it large files or a huge amount of documentation. A lot of the times, by the time you finally got ChatGPT to understand what it was that you wanted from the documentation, the actual documentation itself that you wanted to reference is now long gone out of its quote-unquote memory. Or like previous examples of how you had written certain methods for different endpoints, right? So I, for example, will give it examples of how I've written certain things to give it sort of like a style to stick to, or maybe certain methods that I've written that I'm giving it awareness of, so that it knows that it can also use those methods within code that it generates. And with 3.5, you know, again, if you kept it within the scope of like one smaller file, and you sort of did your little magic with kind of reminding it of key things here and there, you could massage it to work. I was able to actually get a lot of good C# library work done with 3.5, but it was honestly kind of a pain in the ass. So the way that GPT-4 improved that sort of workflow is, well, one big part of it is the massive increase in scope of memory, essentially how much of the conversation history that the assistant can remember, but also in its greatly increased capability for advanced reasoning and actually like thinking things through. I used to get all sorts of random responses from 3.5 that would, you know, sometimes align with examples I gave it or what I had asked it for. Sometimes it didn't. And with GPT-4, it was a lot better because I was able to, you know, start a new thread. Obviously, because the previous thread was with 3.5, but I started a new thread with GPT-4. I gave it a couple examples of previous data models and response models and whatnot that I already had existing, and then I pasted in the documentation for the new endpoint and asked it, given these examples and what's already existing, you know, what would we need to implement these new endpoints? Only tweak that I had to make was specifying Newtonsoft.json instead of the built-in system JSON. There was one adjustment I had to make in the actual code itself that it gave me, and that was changing an I enumerable of a certain type just to be an array of that type. But for one tweak of the prompt and one tweak of the code, I mean, that's way better compared to what I was having to do with 3.5 to get the same kind of result. So obviously GPT-4 is way more capable. It's not as fast, at least at the moment, but it is way more powerful, and it definitely shows. And so you might think, obviously, anybody building an application using the 3.5 API that actually just kind of recently released too, they're going to want to switch over to GPT-4, right? When I first saw the presentation for GPT-4, I got super excited for multiple reasons, and went to go look at the pricing page just to make sure, you know, and boy, is it expensive. It is not nearly as economical as 3.5. In fact, it's like 5 times more expensive, basically. I think for the 8K model, it's like 9 cents per 1,000 tokens, counting input and output. And that's one thing that I found interesting with GPT-4 is they have different rates they charge for the input and output prompts. In my experience, at least, and I could be wrong on this, but in my experience, their models always charged for, like the embedding one, that one just charges for your input tokens, right? But most models will charge for a total of input and output against, you know, a certain rate, right, per 1,000 tokens. GPT-4, however, seems to be charging one rate for input tokens per 1,000 and another rate for output tokens per 1,000. Which I guess kind of makes sense. I don't know how it works with like if that has anything to do with taking into consideration like failed requests or anything like that. Because the input token cost is cheaper. I think it's like 2 or 3 cents per thousand, which is still like, you know, compared to 3.5 or even other like base models like Curie or Babbage, that's still pretty expensive. That's even, you know, on par with cost or more expensive than Da Vinci, which is 2 cents per thousand tokens right now. I don't know why I came in here. Let's turn right here. Alright, so back to what I was saying. I don't think people who are using 3.5 in a scaled manner right now are going to be interested in moving up to GPT-4. It's just so much more expensive that you actually kind of have to, you know, think about what you're spending before you hit go, because you can eat up a lot of tokens in one request. So in 3.5, the only mode of input that you have is text, right? Which is obviously, you know, pretty powerful on its own as is, but GPT-4, however, can also accept images as input, which is pretty crazy. And what it can do with the images is pretty mind-blowing, honestly. Now, there isn't a way to play around with the images quite yet. If I understand correctly, they are working with one specific partner at the moment to get that fleshed out or whatever. But as soon as that does become available for the public to try out, I'm definitely going to give it a shot. It's probably going to be pretty expensive. I'm not sure how the pricing on an image is going to work. Like, is it going to be per million pixels? I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see. But as far as it getting widespread adoption through the API, I don't think that's quite where GPT-4 kind of stands in that whole scope of things. So yeah, personally, I'm going to be using GPT-4 through ChatGPT, kind of just, you know, helping me along with different tasks that I have and whatnot. But for the meantime, at least we're going to stick with 3.5 regarding any API, you know, implementation or anything. So yeah, obviously not a you know, conclusive video on like the different features and strengths of GPT-4, but just my initial thoughts a few days after release and a little bit of time messing around with it. I'm really liking it. It's definitely going to help me out in the future here. It's just been crazy to see how like quickly things are accelerating now. Or in the AI space. It's been pretty wild. And the fact that GPT-4 is already here is insane. Not to mention, you know, whatever the hell GPT-5 is supposed to be. hell, GPT-5 might start some new religions, man. But I appreciate you joining me on this ride. I hope to see you next time. And by the way, if you haven't yet, check me out on Twitch.